What do you mean my account is overdrawn? That's impossible, I said, staring at my phone with carefully crafted surprise as Nathan's so-called sister Diana ranted about the rent money he'd promised her. My smartwatch vibrated with another bank alert, the fifth one in the last hour. He did what? I kept my voice perfectly steady, my face a mask of confusion, letting her believe I was just learning about my husband's betrayal for the first time. The modern living room of my Boston suburban home felt suddenly colder as I paced across the hardwood floors, watching the morning sunlight filter through the large windows. Diana's panicked voice continued through the speaker, but I was already mentally reviewing the contents of the secure folder hidden in my home office labeled insurance policy. My name is Audrey Bennett, and my husband, Nathan, just became one of the biggest stakes in the chess game of my life, but not in the way he thinks. That Sunday morning when I woke up to an empty bed and checked my phone to find his cold farewell text felt like a punch to the gut, even though I'd been anticipating it for weeks. I loved you once, but you've always put your work first. I can't do this anymore. Goodbye. Such calculated cruelty, carefully worded to make me feel guilty while he robbed me blind. I'm so sorry, Diana, I said into the phone, my free hand already pulling up the bank app to document the latest attempted withdrawal. I had no idea he was planning this. I'm just as shocked as you are. The tremor I added to my voice was a nice touch, I thought. I'm a corporate accountant in Boston, and I've spent the last decade tracking financial inconsistencies for some of the largest companies on the East Coast. So when my own husband started showing signs of planning his great escape 6 months ago, he couldn't have chosen a worse target. The bitter irony almost made me smile despite everything. The first red flag appeared in February when Nathan casually asked about our retirement accounts over dinner, showing sudden interest in our finances after years of letting me handle everything. Just thinking about our future, he'd said with that winning smile that once made my heart flutter. Within days came the hushed phone calls that ended abruptly when I entered the room, the unexplained business meetings that left his location tracker in places no business would be conducted, and the way he'd quickly switch tabs on his laptop whenever I walked by. Classic signs of someone planning to vanish. In my line of work, I'd documented these patterns countless times for other victims. What Nathan never realized was that every suspicious transaction, every hidden purchase, every attempt to quietly siphon our money into his secret accounts, I tracked meticulously. Each step he took to try to con me became another piece of evidence, carefully documented, time-stamped, and secured in multiple locations, digital copies sent to my lawyer, physical copies locked away, and backups shared with my colleague Gabriella. By the time he sent that calculatedly cruel goodbye text, thinking he'd executed the perfect escape, I had already protected our assets, flagged our joint accounts, and prepared for every possible scenario he might attempt. My dog Rufus, a rescue golden retriever who'd been my comfort through many long nights of evidence gathering, nudged my leg with his nose as if sensing my tension. I scratched behind his ears absently while watching another fraud alert pop up on my phone. So when the cascade of failed transaction notifications began flooding my phone that Monday morning, I couldn't suppress the small, satisfied smile that formed on my lips. Nathan believed he was 10 steps ahead, but he had no idea he was walking straight into a trap engineered by someone who specialized in catching people exactly like him. My phone continued buzzing with alerts, declined transactions, failed withdrawal attempts, frozen accounts, each notification a confirmation that my preparations had worked perfectly. Each one felt like the satisfying click of a lock falling into place. As I listened to Diana's impressively convincing performance of sisterly concern on the phone, he promised the money would be there today. My landlord is threatening eviction. I almost felt a twinge of admiration for their well-rehearsed con, almost. You might think I was heartbroken, discovering that my husband of 6 years had never truly loved me. But when you spend your career following the money trails people try to hide, you develop an eye for patterns. People believe they're clever when concealing their tracks, but financial transactions always leave evidence. And Nathan? He scattered breadcrumbs like a careless child in a forest. Diana, let me see what I can find out. I'll call you back, I said, ending the call and immediately texting Gabriella, it's happening. Phase 1 complete. Previous night home office. Instead, I created a war room of financial intelligence in the small spare bedroom I'd converted to a home office. Each night after Nathan went to sleep, I'd slip in quietly and pull up bank statements, track suspicious transactions, and methodically build my case file. Every time he thought he was covering his tracks with new accounts or cash withdrawals, he was actually creating a clearer trail of evidence. I installed a small, discreet camera in the office that caught him accessing my laptop 3 separate times when I was out. My personal detective work revealed a pattern of slow, calculated attempts to drain our joint accounts. I watched him testing boundaries, moving small amounts first, then gradually larger sums, all while thinking I remained completely oblivious. You're working late again? Nathan would ask, his voice dripping with performative concern as he leaned against the doorframe of our home office, designer watch gleaming on his wrist. Is everything okay at the firm? Just catching up on some financial reports, I'd reply with a tired smile, careful not to let my gaze linger too long on his face. I never mentioned that the reports I was analyzing included detailed spreadsheets of his own suspicious activities, meticulously documented and time-stamped. End of quarter always gets busy. Nathan would nod sympathetically, bringing me tea I never asked for. Don't work too hard. You deserve a break. The irony of his fake concern made my skin crawl, but I'd smile gratefully and return to my work, tracking the man who was plotting to destroy me. The breaking point came 3 weeks ago on a rainy Tuesday evening. I was actually working late at the office, reviewing a legitimate client case, when Gabriela Rodriguez burst through the glass door of my office without knocking. The overhead fluorescent lights made her normally warm complexion look pale, and she clutched her tablet so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Audrey, you need to see this right now, she said, her voice low and urgent. The normal humor in her eyes was replaced with something I rarely saw in my confident friend, genuine alarm. I was cross-referencing those suspicious transaction patterns for the Eastman Group audit when I found something. It's about Nathan. My stomach tightened into a cold knot as she placed her tablet in front of me. There it was in black and white, Nathan Reed's name linked to a series of questionable transactions we were investigating professionally, not as a witness or victim, but as a person of interest. The same distinct patterns I'd been tracking in our personal accounts were appearing in his professional dealings. This wasn't just about leaving me, he was running from something much larger. There's more, Gabriella whispered, taking a quick glance toward the door before swiping through additional documents. He's been flagged in 3 other fraud investigations. Different states, different names, Nathan Murphy in Chicago, Nathan Brooks in Seattle, but the exact same methodology. He identifies successful women, preferably in finance, marries them, then vanishes with their assets. The last case was in Chicago just before he relocated to Boston. The victim was a nurse named Meredith Hayes. The rain pattered against the window as all the puzzle pieces suddenly locked into place. The practiced charm, the strategic secrecy, the calculated interest in our finances. The expensive wine he always ordered but barely drank. The golf clubs he bought but rarely used. It was all part of a carefully constructed persona. I wasn't his wife, I was his next target. And he had no idea that his latest mark specialized in detecting exactly the kind of financial fraud he was attempting to commit. We need to document everything, I said, my professional calm taking over despite the personal betrayal crushing my chest. And we need to find this Meredith Hayes. That night I sat alone at our kitchen island until dawn, my laptop illuminating the darkness as I reviewed everything with new understanding. The loving husband act, the subtle manipulation, the way he'd gradually tried to separate me from my college friends and even my parents with subtle comments and scheduling conflicts. The pieces formed a perfect, terrible picture. I found myself laughing quietly into the stillness of our kitchen, not because anything was remotely funny, but because of the sheer irony. Of all the women in Boston he could have targeted, he'd chosen an accountant who specialized in detecting financial fraud. He'd picked absolutely the wrong woman to con. For the next 21 days, I executed my counterplan with surgical precision. Every morning I'd kiss Nathan goodbye as if nothing had changed. "Have a good day, honey," I'd say with a practiced smile, handing him the travel mug of coffee I'd prepared. Every evening I'd listen patiently to his elaborate lies about clients and investments, nodding at all the right moments, while secretly recording conversations and documenting every suspicious move. With Gabriella's help after hours, I quietly moved our savings to secure accounts, contacted Agent Harlow at the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, and gathered comprehensive evidence that would not only protect me but help his previous victims. "You seem different lately," Nathan remarked one evening as we prepared dinner, his eyes studying my face with the intensity that once made me feel special but now felt predatory. "Is everything all right?" I carefully arranged my features into a mask of mild exhaustion, thinking about the trap I was meticulously constructing around him, about how his own arrogance would be his downfall. The satisfaction of knowing I was 10 steps ahead of him was almost overwhelming. "Just tired from this quarterly audit," I replied, chopping vegetables with precise movements. "You know how it gets this time of year." I offered a small, convincing yawn. He nodded sympathetically, rubbing my shoulders in a gesture that once brought comfort but now made my skin crawl. "My hard-working wife," he said with what sounded like pride but I now recognized as calculation, probably thinking I was earning more money for him to steal. If he'd been more observant, he might have noticed the determined glint in my eyes when he turned away, the one that said I knew exactly what he was planning and had prepared accordingly. Con artists like Nathan never imagine they'll be the ones getting conned. The fundamental flaw in people who make a living betraying others is they never expect to become the victim of their own game. The morning after Nathan disappeared, his plan began unfolding precisely as he'd anticipated. The first notification came from our bank's fraud department: unusual activity, multiple withdrawal attempts, credit cards approaching their limits. The second call was from Diana, his fake sister, hysterical about money he'd supposedly promised her. The third, and most interesting, was from a Chicago area code I didn't recognize. "Is this Audrey Bennett?" a woman's voice asked, tension evident in every syllable. "I'm trying to locate Nathan Reed. I have reason to believe he's your husband." Her husband. The words hit me like an electric shock, despite my preparations. "I'm sorry, who is this?" I asked, gripping my phone tighter as I sat down at my kitchen table, the morning sunlight creating patterns on the polished wood. "My name is Meredith Hayes," she explained, her voice carrying the unmistakable edge of someone who had been deeply wronged. "Nathan Reed, or Nathan Murphy as I knew him, is still legally my husband. He disappeared with my life savings 3 years ago. I've been tracking him ever since." A smile spread across my face despite the gravity of the situation. "Actually, here he went by Nathan Reed, and you're not going to believe this, Meredith, but I've been expecting your call." Relief flooded her voice as I continued, "I'd like to meet in person, if possible." 2 days later, we sat in a quiet corner of a cafe with security cameras I'd carefully selected, comparing notes over steaming cups of coffee, same charming smile in our wedding photos, same investment consultant story, same pattern of gradually draining accounts before disappearing. But this time there was one crucial difference in his pattern: me. "I've compiled enough evidence to bring him down permanently," I told her, showing her my meticulously organized digital files on my tablet. "But I need your help to catch him." Her eyes, which had carried so much pain when we first met, now showed a steely determination that matched my own. At that exact moment, my phone buzzed with a text from Nathan. "I'm sorry for leaving like that. Can we talk? Just one last time. I can explain everything." Perfect. He was following the exact pattern I'd identified in Meredith's case, reaching out after the initial disappearance, attempting to manipulate his way into one last opportunity to access any remaining funds. I showed the message to my lawyer, who was already preparing our counterattack with the FBI. "Let's spring the trap," she said, her eyes gleaming with professional satisfaction. Coffee shop meeting. I agreed to meet Nathan at a carefully selected coffee shop downtown, one with multiple security cameras and clear exits where Agent Harlow's team could position themselves discreetly. My friend Julia Chin sat at a distant table, pretending to work on her laptop while actually monitoring the situation. When I arrived, Nathan was already there, presenting the perfect picture of remorse. His normally immaculate hair was slightly disheveled, his eyes deliberately reddened, his designer clothes just rumpled enough to suggest distress without looking unkempt. He'd clearly practiced this performance. "Audrey, I'm so sorry," he began, reaching for my hand across the wooden table, his voice carrying the precise modulation of practiced contrition. "I've been dealing with some bad investment decisions. Several clients backed out unexpectedly. I panicked. I needed some time to think." I pulled my hand away with careful hesitation, playing my role perfectly, the hurt but potentially forgiving wife. "How much trouble are you in, Nathan?" I asked quietly. His eyes lit up for just a millisecond, a predator sensing prey, before returning to their practiced sadness. I caught that flash of calculation, storing it away as another piece of evidence of his true character. "About $200,000, he admitted with a perfectly timed sigh of shame. "But I have a solid plan to recover everything. I just need temporary access to our emergency fund to secure this new investment opportunity. It's guaranteed returns, Audrey. I can fix all of this." I pretended to consider his request, watching him squirm with barely concealed anticipation. The wireless microphone taped to my chest captured every word for Agent Harlow's team listening nearby. "The emergency fund," I repeated slowly. "You mean the one you attempted to empty yesterday morning? And again at 3 a.m. today?" His facade faltered momentarily, genuine surprise flickering across his features before he recovered. "That was a mistake," he backpedaled smoothly. "I wasn't thinking clearly. But if you help me now, I promise I'll..." "To what? To disappear again? Or to stick around long enough to drain my accounts like you did to Meredith in Chicago?" The color drained from Nathan's face, his carefully constructed mask crumbling completely. For the first time since I'd known him, Nathan Reed, or Murphy, or whatever his real name actually was, looked genuinely shocked, his mouth slightly open, eyes wide with alarm. "You, no," he whispered, his voice stripped of its usual confident charm. "The funny thing is," I continued, calmly sliding a tablet across the table and tapping the screen to display a comprehensive timeline of his activities, "if you'd done your research, you might have realized that trying to con an accountant who specializes in financial fraud wasn't your smartest career move." My voice remained steady, but I couldn't hide the slight satisfaction I felt watching his practiced confidence collapse. At that precise moment, 2 FBI agents in dark suits approached our table from different directions. I stood up, smoothing my blazer with deliberate calm. Oh, and Nathan? You might want to call a lawyer. A good one. You're going to need it. The look of utter disbelief on his face as Agent Harlow read him his rights was something I'd remember for a long time, the dawning realization that he wasn't the mastermind he believed himself to be. As the agents led Nathan toward the door, his shoulders slumped in defeat, my phone vibrated with an incoming call from Gabriella. Her timing was impeccable. "We've got him," she said, her voice brimming with triumph and barely contained excitement. "The team just finished analyzing those offshore accounts you flagged. Nathan isn't just running marriage cons, he's been operating a sophisticated Ponzi scheme targeting professional women. We're looking at fraud in the millions, Audrey. This is huge." Through the coffee shop's large front window, I watched as Nathan was placed in an unmarked federal vehicle, the handcuffs glinting in the sunlight. He looked diminished somehow, nothing like the confident, charismatic man who believed he'd outsmarted everyone around him. Julia approached from her observation table, giving me a supportive squeeze on the shoulder before taking the seat Nathan had just vacated. "How many victims are we talking about?" I asked Gabriella, my stomach tightening despite our victory. I already knew the answer wouldn't be pretty. 27 confirmed so far, spanning 6 states, 14 marriages or engagements, all to successful professional women, mostly in finance or healthcare, she detailed clinically. But here's the most disturbing part, he was planning something much bigger. We found business plans and incorporation documents for a new investment firm he was setting up. He was going to use your credentials, your reputation, and your client contacts to lure in high-net-worth individuals. The potential damage would have been in the tens of millions. I thought about all those evenings when he'd casually ask about my work, showing what I'd interpreted as supportive interest. The times he'd offer to proofread my presentations or suggest improvements to my client pitches. He wasn't being a supportive husband, he was gathering information, studying my professional methodology, planning to exploit my hard-earned reputation for his most ambitious scam yet. "The irony," I said, absently stirring my now cold coffee, "is that if he hadn't gotten so greedy, if he'd just stuck to his usual marriage and disappear routine, he might have slipped away again. But he just had to go bigger." "That's not even the best part," Gabriella continued, her voice rising with excitement. "Remember that exclusive country club membership he insisted was essential for networking last year? Turns out he was using it specifically to target Julia Chen. He was already laying the groundwork for his next disappearing act while you were still in the picture." Julia nodded grimly across from me, confirming Gabriella's words. I recalled all those Sunday golf games Nathan had suddenly become passionate about, the evening networking events he'd attend alone because I was too busy with work. While playing the role of devoted husband at home, he was already grooming his next victim. But what he hadn't realized was that Julia wasn't just any real estate investor, she was my friend since college, and she'd been working with me to document his every move for months. "Let me guess," I said, smiling at Julia while still on the phone with Gabriella. "Julia gave you access to all their private conversations, every email, every text, every accidental meeting at the club lounge." Complete with audio recordings, Gabriella confirmed with satisfaction. He literally handed us a blueprint of his entire operation while trying to charm her. The guy practically wrote our federal case for us. Julia deserves an Academy Award for her performance. Julia gave a small, modest bow from across the table. "I just followed your lead." Besides, watching him try so hard while knowing what we knew, it was almost entertaining. I couldn't help but laugh, the tension of the past months finally releasing. Nathan had spent nearly a year meticulously planning his exit strategy, convinced he was the most intelligent person in every room. Meanwhile, every single person he thought he was manipulating had been working together, building an airtight case that would ensure he'd never victimize anyone again. "Have you heard anything about his sister, Diana?" I asked, remembering her frantic call that morning, the first domino in today's events. "That's another fascinating thread," Gabriella replied. "Turns out she's not his sister at all, she's his accomplice and occasional romantic partner. They've been running this scam together for years. She plays the desperate sister or cousin to create urgency around why he suddenly needs cash, right before he vanishes. She's being picked up by federal agents in New York right now." I sank back in my chair, taking it all in as Julia ordered fresh coffee for us both. The scope and sophistication of Nathan's deception were breathtaking, but equally striking was his fundamental blindness. He'd been so focused on maintaining his intricate web of lies that he never noticed the counterintelligence operation closing around him from all sides. "One more thing," Gabriella added, her voice dropping slightly. "We found his true identity through fingerprint matching. His real name isn't Nathan Reed or Murphy, it's Nathan Roberts, and he's been wanted for similar fraud schemes in Canada since 2015. I smiled, thinking about the exhaustive case files waiting back at the office. "Well, Nathan Roberts, welcome to the consequences of your actions." I was preparing to head back to meet with Agent Harlow when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You think you're clever, but you have no idea what's coming. Check your email now." Seconds later, my inbox pinged with a new message containing dozens of detailed surveillance photos. Me walking Rufus in the park, having lunch with my parents last weekend, working late at my office desk, even shots taken through my bedroom window. The message was clear: I was being watched. A surge of anger, not fear, rushed through me as I realized the extent of the invasion. I immediately forwarded everything to Gabriella, Julia, and my lawyer, then placed a call directly to Agent Harlow. "We've got another player in the game," I said without preamble. "Already tracking it," she replied, her professional tone unwavering. The photos were sent from an IP address we've been monitoring since this investigation began. Marcus Wilson, Nathan's former cellmate from a brief incarceration in Phoenix. He's been operating as Nathan's enforcement arm, surveilling and threatening victims who get too close to exposing their operation. I thought about Meredith Hayes, wondering if these intimidation tactics were why she'd waited so long to come forward with what she knew. "Where is Wilson now?" I asked Agent Harlow, a sense of urgency building. "That's the problem, we can't pinpoint his location, but he's probably..." Agent Harlow stopped mid-sentence, the sound of rapid typing in the background. "Hold on. We're detecting activity on one of Nathan's frozen accounts. Someone's trying to access it right now, from inside your house." "My house?" "Where I'd left my laptop running our surveillance software." My stomach dropped as I immediately called Meredith, who was supposed to be waiting there for me. The phone rang 3 times before she answered. We have a situation," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Diana's here. She must have had a key or known how to pick the lock. She's trying to access Nathan's accounts from your computer." Diana, the fake sister who was supposedly being arrested in New York. My mind rapidly assessed the possibilities. Either the arrest had failed or... "Meredith, get out of there immediately. Diana's not working alone." I was already moving toward my car, Julia following close behind. I heard a loud crash through the phone, followed by Meredith's sharp intake of breath. "Too late," she whispered. "Wilson's here too. He just came through the back door." My heart hammered in my chest, but my training kept my thoughts crystalline in their clarity. This desperate move was exactly the kind of last-ditch effort I'd anticipated and prepared for. "Meredith," I said calmly, "remember our contingency plan? It's time to activate Protocol 3. Through the phone, I heard Meredith's voice shift from fearful to controlled. "Hey Diana, before you and your partner do anything you'll regret, you might want to look at what's actually on this screen." I couldn't help but smile, knowing exactly what they were seeing. Every file, every account, every piece of evidence wasn't just stored locally on my laptop, it was being live-streamed to secure FBI servers. Plus, the entire house had been wired with surveillance cameras after I discovered Nathan's true identity, with agents positioned strategically in the neighborhood. "It's over," I heard Meredith say with remarkable composure. "Look outside." The unmistakable sound of police sirens filled the background, growing louder by the second as FBI agents converged on my property. Within minutes, both Diana and Wilson were in custody, and Meredith was safe. I arrived home to find Agent Harlow waiting for me in my driveway, the flashing lights of law enforcement vehicles illuminating the early evening sky. Yellow crime scene tape cordoned off my front yard, neighbors watching curiously from their porches. "Quite the elaborate chess game you orchestrated," she said with professional admiration. "You anticipated they'd make exactly this move." I surveyed my home, now an active crime scene with federal agents collecting evidence. People like Nathan, Diana, and Wilson always get desperate at the end. They're so accustomed to controlling every situation that they can't handle losing that control. I watched as the agents led a handcuffed Diana and Wilson to separate vehicles. I just needed to make them believe they had one final opportunity to win. Well, with this home invasion, the intimidation attempts, and the surveillance photos, we can add witness intimidation, conspiracy, and stalking charges to their already substantial list, Agent Harlow said, satisfaction evident in her typically stoic expression. "Your comprehensive trap worked flawlessly." Rufus barked from inside Agent Harlow's car where he'd been kept safe during the operation. I thought about Nathan sitting in his holding cell, likely still confident he could charm or negotiate his way out of trouble. He had no idea that his desperate final gambit had just provided exactly the additional evidence needed to ensure he'd never victimize another person. 2 months later, I sat in the federal courthouse, watching Nathan's carefully constructed world disintegrate completely. Gone was the charismatic smile and confident posture, replaced by a hollow-eyed look of utter defeat as the judge delivered his sentence. The designer suit had been replaced by standard-issue clothing, his once perfect hair now grown out and unkempt. "Nathan Roberts," the judge pronounced, her voice resonating through the hushed courtroom, "for multiple counts of wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, and witness intimidation. This court sentences you to 25 years in federal prison, with no possibility of parole for 15 years. I caught his eye as U.S. Marshals led him away. For a brief moment, the carefully maintained facade crumbled completely, revealing the panic and rage beneath. The man who had texted me "I loved you once, but you always put your work first" now faced a future where love, freedom, and control, the things he'd manipulated to harm others, were permanently beyond his reach. Diana and Wilson didn't fare much better in their separate trials. Both eventually accepted plea deals to avoid maximum sentences, but they would still serve substantial prison time. As part of their agreements, they provided detailed evidence against Nathan's entire network, exposing operations that spanned 3 countries and involved dozens of accomplices. Meredith sat beside me during the sentencing, squeezing my hand in solidarity as Nathan's victims, our unexpected sisterhood of survivors, stood one by one to deliver their impact statements. Each woman shared a similar story of deception and betrayal, but each ended with the same powerful message of reclamation. We hadn't just received legal justice, we had reclaimed our power, our dignity, and our trust in our own judgment. The spring sunshine streamed through the courthouse windows, symbolizing the new beginning that had emerged from winter's darkness. After the proceedings concluded, Agent Harlow approached me with an envelope in hand. The Bureau could use someone with your specific skill set and personal experience with financial fraud cases. Have you ever considered consulting for us? We have a new task force focused exclusively on romance and marriage fraud schemes. I thought about all the other Nathans out there, all the sophisticated scammers who believed they were too clever to be caught. The opportunity to help prevent others from experiencing what I and so many women had endured felt like the perfect next chapter. You know what? I think I'd like that very much, I replied, accepting the envelope containing the formal offer. As I walked out of the courthouse into the bright Boston spring sunshine, Meredith and Julia flanking me on either side, I felt lighter than I had in years. Nathan had believed he was destroying me, but he'd only catalyzed my transformation into someone stronger and more determined. The weight of betrayal had been replaced by purpose. Now I had a new mission, ensuring Nathan Roberts would be the last con man to underestimate a woman with financial expertise and a passion for justice. The thought made me smile as we descended the courthouse steps together, heading toward a future none of us had anticipated but all of us had helped create. 6 months after Nathan's sentencing, I stood confidently at a podium in a packed conference room at the FBI's Financial Crimes Division in Boston. The presentation behind me detailed what had become officially known as the Reed case, though neither of those names belonged to us anymore. I'd reclaimed my maiden name, Bennett, wanting no lingering connection to any of Nathan's carefully crafted identities. The contemporary con artist rarely uses physical weapons, I explained to the attentive room of federal agents, analysts, and new recruits. Instead, they weaponize trust, emotional manipulation, and digital technology. But no matter how sophisticated their schemes become, they invariably leave financial traces. The key is knowing precisely where and how to look for those patterns. I clicked to the next slide showing a complex network diagram of interconnected fraud cases we'd identified. The specialized program I'd helped develop with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit was already yielding significant results. 3 major romance scam operations had been dismantled in the past month alone, resulting in the recovery of millions in stolen assets and the arrest of over a dozen perpetrators. Meredith had become an invaluable consultant to our team, her first-hand experience providing crucial insights into how these predators selected and groomed their targets. Financial predators count on shame keeping their victims silent, I continued, making eye contact with the diverse group of professionals hanging on every word. By creating a system where victims can safely come forward without judgment, we've removed their most powerful protection, secrecy. After the presentation concluded to enthusiastic applause, I checked my phone to find a message from Gabriella. Another victim of Nathan's had been located in Vancouver, a small business owner who, unlike the rest of us, had lost absolutely everything: her home, her retirement savings, her family business of 20 years. But this time, we could offer more than sympathy. The forensic team had finally decrypted Nathan's hidden files, revealing offshore accounts scattered across 3 continents. We can recover at least 60% of what she lost, Gabriella's message concluded. Call me when you're done. As I gathered my materials, I found myself reflecting on that cold Sunday morning when I'd awakened to find Nathan's calculated farewell text, how he'd tried to devastate me with those carefully crafted cruel words designed to make me blame myself. Instead, his attempts to destroy me had inadvertently given me something powerful: the opportunity and platform to help others fight back against financial predators like him. That evening, I relaxed on the balcony of my new waterfront apartment overlooking Boston Harbor, Rufus contentedly sleeping at my feet. The spring breeze carried the scent of salt water as I sipped a glass of wine, appreciating the profound irony of my situation. Nathan had dedicated his life to exploiting strong, successful women, systematically stripping them of their assets and self-confidence. Yet in the end, he'd unintentionally created something far more powerful than his schemes, a nationwide network of survivors transformed into advocates, all committed to dismantling the systems that enabled men like him to operate. My phone lit up with a group message from our survivor network. Another case had just resulted in a conviction in Florida. Another predator stopped. Another victory. I smiled, watching the harbor lights twinkle in the gathering dusk. Sometimes the most satisfying form of justice isn't just surviving, it's emerging stronger, more purposeful, and helping others do the same. In trying to diminish me, Nathan had inadvertently set me on the path to my most meaningful work. That realization brought a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years.